Yesterday afternoon, TalkSport's chief football correspondent revealed that West Ham had in fact had an agreement in place to sign Ruben Amorim from Sporting Lisbon to replace the outward-bound David Moyes as West Ham manager, head coach, whatever you want to call it. Caused a massive stir because the story finished up with, whilst West Ham had agreed, I think he was suggesting that agreed personal terms with Amorim, that David Sullivan had in fact looked at the compensation clause, which was 10 million euros, about 8.5 million quid. And David Sullivan had said, no, I'm not paying that. That's too expensive. I'm not going to do the deal. So this is very different from our initial version of events, which was, I think, that Amorim had flown over. We all knew that. That's no surprise to anyone. Flew over in a private jet, and he didn't like what was on the table. He didn't like what was offered. So he left. The basic decision was Amorim's. Alex Crook, who is TalkSport's chief football correspondent, has changed that. So he's basically saying, no, the decision was West Ham's. Now, as I would understand, because West Ham don't look good. If that's the case, West Ham do not look good. So as I would expect, the club last night basically refuted the allegations. But in their endeavours and their haste to deny what is a bad news story for West Ham, I think the explanation that they gave has actually made things worse, not better. So, if you believe that Alex Crook's version of events, we basically didn't do the deal because of money. Amorim was too expensive. Now, this very much plays into the narrative that West Ham went for the cheap option in Julian Lopetegui, who, of course, was clubless at the time, so there was no compensation package required. We also understand it. He's not on the biggest of wages. Well, it's a big wage for you and it's a big wage for me. I don't know how he's coping on £3 million a year. But what I'm saying is, in football terms, it's not great. Now, I think the first alarm bell that was ringing with the story was I wasn't entirely sure that West Ham had agreed terms with this guy because apparently he was looking for £8-9 million a year. So, do I believe that West Ham didn't do this deal because of money? I did believe that, but I don't believe we agreed to deal with him in the first place. There's no way West Ham are going to agree to pay someone £8-9 million a year, not a manager anyway. And you know what? I think we'll get to that maybe another time. The fact that West Ham appear to waste lots and lots of money on strikers and are very happy to pay big money and waste them on players, but we still don't see the guy who holds the top job as the most important person at the club. So it's weird to try and scrimp and go cheap on the manager. But anyway, West Ham basically came out and they said that that's not the case. That's not what happened. There was no agreement in place. Okay, let's take things at face value. So let me just tell you what was said. Basically, the reason was that Amorim didn't succeed Moyes, and this is coming from a top source at the club, said he could turn out to be an amazing manager, but he's only done it with one club in his own country. We thought he'd be a big risk. Now, the statement did go on to say that actually the 10 million euro compensation was a factor, but the main reason that West Ham didn't do it was they thought he was a big risk. Now, I don't want to paraphrase anyone because I think it's really important to, if we're going to dissect this, that we do it accurately. But what I do take from that is still, it was West Ham's decision, right? If we still can take from that Amorim would have joined West Ham. Now, this is really interesting. Our reasoning for not doing it is interesting, and it will, I think, confirm what a lot of people have suspected about what West Ham value when we're looking to hire a manager. And that would appear to be Premier League experience and experience in itself. I'll read it once again, because I'm going to dissect this now. He could turn out to be an amazing manager. Granted, we don't know that yet. He could be good, bad or indifferent. So I'm not going to use Amorim as an example. I'm actually going to use Arne Slot, because there's a lot of comparisons. We'll get to that in a second. He's only done it with one club in his own country. We thought he was a big risk. Okay. Well, firstly, that bit's not true that he's only basically done it for one club. When he's saying done it, do they mean that he's only won trophies at one club? Okay, fair enough. So I don't believe they mean that, though, because that would mean we'd be looking for managers who have won multiple trophies at multiple different clubs. I'm not sure that that's what we're doing. I think it's a case of we're basically saying he's inexperienced. But it's not true. He's not only been at one club. And in fact, I've got the clubs here. We already knew because in the summer we did a big video on Ruben Amorim. Also did a video even before Moyes had left last season. I can't remember what it was called. I did it on this channel. The 6 best up and coming young managers in Europe or something like that. It's on the channel somewhere. And we looked at him and I remember discussing the compensation package that Sporting had paid Braga for his services, right? Now, he has been at, obviously we know he's been at Braga, but he was also at a club called Casapia first. So it's actually, he's been at 3 clubs, but Sporting's the latest one. But I will concede that he is inexperienced, okay? But it's not true to say he's only done it at one club. Now, here's the really interesting thing, because I'm going to start making comparisons with Arne Slot now. And the reason I'll make comparisons with Arne Slot is because we were linked with him as well. And we didn't get him. And actually, it looks like he's pretty damn good. So these are people that we have been linked with, and possibly people we've at least, well, in Amorim's case, we've had personal contact with them. In Slot's case, probably had contact with the agents. Slot is in a similar situation. He's not a one-club man, but he'd be most famous for what he did at Feyenoord. But he was also at SC Camber and then AZ Alkmaar, who are obviously familiar to West Ham fans because we played them relatively recently. And then Feyenoord. Okay, a little bit older, mid-40s, 45, 46. But all very, very similar. And I'll tell you where these two managers are similar. And the reason I'm going to talk about both of them, because I'm going to make a point in this video that actually, if this truly is our policy, it's going to stop us from ever getting the best in class and getting the best managers that we could possibly get. Basically, if we deem the best up-and-coming young managers as too risky, we're never going to get best in class. We're really not. But before I go into that, because I say good points. I'm not sure they're good points. They're depressing points to make. You know, so that's going to make you stick around for the remainder of the video. But this particular video is sponsored by Match Bingo. Now, Match Bingo, if you've not been playing Match Bingo, why not, basically? Unless you're under 18, you can't. It's basically a betting app. But it's a low-stakes betting app, which means you're not going to be able to basically bet your house on everything because each card, you can only get a maximum of 5 cards on each game, is only £2. Now, what is a card? Well, a card is focused on an individual game. And rather than having a bingo card that has lots of numbers on it, you basically get a bingo card that has lots of events in it. And there are 15 different things that you need to happen in a game. A throw-in, a goal kick, a corner, that sort of thing. There are 3 lines of 5, and every time you get a line, you get some money if you're the first person to do it. Every time you get a second row, you get second. Then there's a bonus pot, and of course, if you get a full house, you get money as well. We've had over 100 winners on Hammers Chat. Now, the link is in the description below. There's a special offer at the moment. By the way, you want to get your cards in for the West Ham Nottingham Forest game, but you can bet on anything. We've had people win on the Crystal Palace game recently. What the deal is basically if you deposit £10, they're going to put £20 credit in your account, basically. And you're getting 5 cards for the price of 3. You don't have to do that. You can just buy 1 card on each game. That's what I do. I play 1 card on each game. And I've won a couple of times myself. So if what you want to do is basically put 5 cards on a game, you only have to buy 3. So basically spend £6 of your credits. And there you go. But absolutely brilliant app. And I've got to say, when you're watching the game, it's quite interesting to watch these things happen because they're obvious things, a lot of them. You know, it might be a left-footed shot, a right-footed shot. So it's the more difficult ones are someone to hit the bar and things like that. But we've had plenty of winners. Check it out. The link is in the description below. Match Bingo. Please do use the link. I know you've come from Hammers Chat and we get a nice pat on the head for it. Okay, let's just talk about Slot and let's just talk about Amorim for a moment because both of whom... I was always guilty. Before I did my research on Amorim, I think from afar viewed Portugal as a big 3. I thought that Porto, Benfica and Sporting Lisbon all sort of, carved it up and they won the title about as much as each other. It's not the case. It's like Benfica and Porto win it much more. Much, much more. And so what Amorim's done is he's gone in there and he's made Sporting a powerhouse. It's very, very impressive. He's got a very impressive record. Really good. So it's very similar to actually... what I'm looking at what Slot did with Feyenoord because, of course, Ajax and PSV are the big powerhouses there and to get them up and to win the league. And by the way, they both did it playing really, really good football. By the only metric you can use, which is how they're performing in their own countries, they excelled and they look like the best young coaches in Europe. We're discounting these people. And I'll just go back. Let me just go back now. I know I've already read it once. You think, all right, mate, you made your point. But it's he could be an amazing manager, talking about Amorim, but he's only done it with one club in his own country. I don't want to pick them apart on the one club bit, all right? But I would expect them to know that. If they've interviewed a coach, I would expect them to know that he's coached at more than one club. But I just want to leave there. We all thought it was a big risk. Now, the we all part is trying to mitigate the responsibility on that. It's basically saying collectively, I don't know, the board, Sullivan, Kretinsky, Steiten, possibly even Mark Noble, we all thought it was a big risk. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure. I'm prepared to concede that out of 4 or 5 people in a room, 1 or 2 might be cautious. It just doesn't match with what I know about human nature. That there's going to be some forward-thinking people in a room who would not see that as a risk, or some people who like taking a risk, a calculated risk. And I do think once you've made the calculation and you've looked at Arne Slot and you've looked at Ruben Amorim, you think, okay, that is a calculated risk. Now, that would then bring it back to money. If we didn't do it because of money, that's a separate argument. Already been done. Gio did it in yesterday's video. A lot of people doing it yesterday. This is not what I'm saying here. Although I would like us to start prioritising, the quality of our manager just as much as we're more than happy to spend big money on and waste big money. And I know we didn't intend on wasting money on Skamaka or Sebastian Haller or Felipe Anderson. We don't go out with the intention. We don't go out with bad intentions trying to lose money. But we do. But we take the risk. We're willing to take a risk on a striker, but we're not willing to take a risk on a manager. And I would also agree that just possibly, Amorim may or may not work out. And in many respects, West Ham better be hoping that he doesn't turn out to be a good manager at Manchester United, because West Ham could look very, very silly. Really, really silly. Look, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It was the guy in... what was his name? Ibrahim Osman. Remember Ibrahim Osman? We looked to try and get him last January. We couldn't get the deal over the line. There was some sort of nonsense with agents. In the end, he went on sign for Brighton. And a lot of people were disappointed we didn't get this guy. The only reason I bring that up, I remember the club saying at the time, well, look, it could turn out that we've missed out on a world superstar, or he could do nothing in the game. We don't know. Time will tell. So there is that. And okay, that's fine. And if you remember... I think his name was Abdullah Simmer. I might have that wrong. He was at Slavia or Sparta Prague. He was at one of the Prague clubs. West Ham didn't sign him. We were rumoured. Everyone saying, why didn't we sign this guy? We should have got him. And then I think he ended up signing for Stoke or something like that. And he ended up doing nothing. I think he's still quite a young man and maybe he can do stuff in the game. And my knowledge on him is probably 12 months old. But he just popped into my mind then. Not everyone we miss out on turns out to be brilliant. But sometimes they're John Duran. So whilst there are examples, or Samu Omarodian, so whilst there are examples of people we've missed out on that have not gone on and done anything, we've also made bad calls and not done that final push for players that have actually turned out and look like they're going to be really, really good. And we've missed out and we end up looking terrible for it. Julian Alvarez was another one, wasn't it, of course? Anyway. We don't know. We don't know what was going to happen with Amorim, but Slot's looking like a bit of a miss as well. And all I'm saying now is I wasn't entirely sure why, because he was, when I often say that Julian Lopetegui wasn't one of my choices, wasn't in my top 5, Ruben Amorim was and Arne Slot was. They both were. But now I'm coming to the realisation it was never realistic, and I don't think it's because of money. It's because of this rule. And is it a rule? No, but basically, if we distill this down, what they're saying is it's risky to get somebody that's basically inexperienced and only done it in one country. I've got to forget the one club thing because it's just not accurate. So even if you look like the best young up-and-coming coach in Europe, even if you take an unfashionable team, and sorry for any Sporting Lisbon and Feyenoord fans, but they're not the big ones. Basically, those clubs are not Barcelona and Real Madrid in their leagues. They're the upstarts, right? They've done a Leverkusen, basically. I think can we say that that's fair? They've done a bit of a Leverkusen, maybe not the same, but you get my point. They're not the powerhouses. So even if you're a young, up-and-coming manager, and you can take a decent club, and you can go and batter the big boys in your home country, and look tactically proficient, and have a real identity of playing, look like you are... You're going to be one of the best young upcoming managers. That's not going to be good at West Ham. Basically, and I've said it already once in this video, if you are best in class, we're still not going to take a risk. At West Ham, there is more value, it appears, placed on somebody who might have an average record, but be seen to be solid, safety first. And I have to say, that worries me more than the money. Because whilst I think there was an opportunity to get Slot, and I think there was an opportunity to get Slot last season, halfway through last season. And certainly he wasn't asking for 8-9 million a year. He really wasn't. I've got to say, funny enough, Liverpool don't spend tons of money, but they do show ambition. They are ambitious in the way that they plan out their strategy, both in terms of transfer strategy and in terms of their coaching appointments, in terms of their head of recruitment, a director of football appointments. They are tight. There's no doubt about it. The Fenway Group are a little bit tight. So I would not be surprised if Amorim ends up on £8-9 million a year or something like that and slots on 5. I don't know. I've completely fabricated those figures. But it's still an ambition in targeting him and saying, now that guy looks like the best young up-and-coming coach in Europe, so we're going to get him. And I find it a bit depressing, actually. I do find it a bit depressing that actually, I think now I know. And you know what? You could be welcome for saying, oh, well, you know, you're a bit late to the party, aren't you, for realising that. I now know. I now know that West Ham are not going to do that innovative thing. We're not going to go. We're safety first. We are, and the irony is, with all this, appointing Julen Lopetegui could well be a bigger risk than the other things, because he might get it wrong. And now, I'm quite sure the club are squirming. I'm quite sure they're squirming now. They're almost thinking, I hope Amorim fails and hope Lopetegui succeeds. Well, you know, as West Ham fans and as people just played for Man United, we want that anyway, wouldn't we? We want to be doing better than them. Of course, it's sport, but it does put a certain pressure on the club. And the depressing thing is that the next time that a young up and coming manager looks to be doing big things, and it could be in Portugal, could be in Holland, Germany, whatever, we're not going to be in. West Ham are not going to be that club that are looking to do it. However, I will leave you with this bombshell, if you want. It's just my thoughts. I'm not entirely sure when West Ham come to appoint our next manager or head coach that David Sullivan will solely be the one doing it.